First of all, welcome, and second, let us warn you in advance, you're liable to perceive us just a little different than other meetings of other fellowships you may have attended. The primary reason that's liable to happen is we intend for you to have a different experience here. Who's in the facility at this meeting for the first time tonight? Anyone here for the very first time? Good, one or two of you. Welcome. And so you know, what we do here is we try and show people the testimony of these authors. We use this book in 12-Step Recovery because the process described by the authors of this book has been proven to work for addicts of the hopeless variety, addicts to alcohol and other substances. So what I do, and have been doing for lots of years, is I attempt to show you how I find my experience in the book and encourage you to have your experience with it. And if we both do our job, we share a spiritual experience in this room every week. How many of you have been here before and can witness for these folks that happens? So those of you joining us online, they're raising their hands. And those of you that are watching them raise their hands. When we speak to you of a spiritual experience in 12-Step Recovery, we're talking to you about something sensory, something tangible. You'll feel it. And when you do, I'll know, and I'll call it to your attention because we would teach you to talk to you about the power we call God without giving you a demonstration of the power. We're also going to have some other experiences here tonight because tonight we're in step 1, which is sometimes, you know, highs and lows, right? So we're going to take a look at the experience of the authors in a step 1 experience and see if we can share some of that and you know, at least come to agreement about the potential for this solution. I want to start first in the forward to the first edition, if you're following along in a book, and the forward to the first edition tells us who are the authors of the book. They tell us who the we is. How many of you have been to an AA meeting before? Did you go in and see a poster on the wall that said we admitted? And so the we in that is the we they're going to describe. And a lot of people will mislead us because they were misled, and they'll say we're we, and no, we're not. This tells us very clearly who we is, and the importance of that is this is their experience, not necessarily our experience. And if we don't align ours with theirs, then we may not get what they got. So, forward to the first edition, we of Alcoholics Anonymous are more than 100 men and women who have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. To show other alcoholics precisely how we have recovered is the main purpose of the book. So they have precise instructions of what happened to them, you know, what they were like, what happened, what they're like now. And they leave us this path to follow, if that makes sense. And then it says, for them, we hope these pages will prove so convincing that no further authentication will be necessary. We think this account of our experiences will help everyone to better understand the alcoholic. So that's why they say to show others rather than to tell others, because they describe an experience, and we're meant to impart that experience to whomever we're working with. Does that make sense? Okay. Many do not comprehend that the alcoholic is a very sick person, and besides, we're sure that our way of living has advantages for all. So they're going to describe a manner of living upon which they entered in once they discovered that there may be a solution for their seemingly hopeless state of mind and body they found themselves in. Fair enough? So I'm going to go from there to the forward to the second edition, only because I like to show you something. A lot of times the reason we focus on this book is not because we're legalist, but because I'm tired of watching people die in addiction never been told the truth. And so I feel like we can help them understand that this is testimony. The reason there's power in this book 80 plus years later is there's power in testimony, right? And so it doesn't help if we add to it or take from it. We simply need to find our experience within their testimony. And so what I like people to understand is what people call the program is usually the fellowship. They say, I'm in the program. Have you ever heard that? Have you ever said that? What you really mean is you're in the fellowship because the program's described in the book. Right? So if you say I'm in the program, you'll have to point out the page. And I'm going to tell you why I say that. The book was written first, and then the fellowship was named after the book. And the reason I tell you that is so that you understand that we're not legalists here. We just want everyone to have the dignity of being told the truth before they decide what else they're going to do. So I'm on the bottom of XVII and forward to the second edition. It says, it's now time the struggling groups thought to place their message and unique experience before the world. This determination bore fruit in the spring of 1939 by the publication of this volume. So they wrote down what they were like, what happened, what they're like now in this volume. Precise instructions, precisely how they recovered. It says the membership had then reached about 100 men and women. The fledgling society, which had been nameless, now began to be called Alcoholics Anonymous from the title of its own book. I only tell you that because people, when you'll say that in a fellowship meeting, they'll say, oh, nonsense, I don't like big book thumpers. Any of you ever heard that? I'm not a big book thumper. I know this book applies to me, and if I read this book and do what it says, it won't matter to me so much what you do or say. And if I don't practice what this book teaches, I will be greatly troubled by what you do and say. And so I want the freedom from that, so I do what they say. Not because someone in a room told me, because everyone that wrote this is dead. But they told a story of being dead and then raised to life and living a life better than the best they'd ever known. And I desperately wanted that, and I've discovered it's true, and it happened for me. Yep. Fair enough? So I'm going to go from there. Wow, a round of applause for the authors. That's good. And they're all dead, and they still getting a round of applause. Okay, so I'm going to go to the doctor's opinion, and I want to go over to XVII, and I'm going to jump right to the bottom of the page. I'm going to do something a little different, because just in case you thought there was only one way to do this, I'm going to fuck that whole plan up. So I'm at the top of the page. It says, we believe and so suggested a few years ago that the action of alcohol on these chronic alcoholics is a manifestation of an allergy. How many of you have had trouble with the idea of an allergy describing your addiction? Any of you just not care, didn't think about it? No one's even going to respond to me? Have you heard the guys in the room that say, I have an allergy, I drink and I break out in handcuffs? And so you slough it off? How many of you are drinkers? How many of you have discovered when you drink alcohol it energizes you? Yes. It's a sedative. That's an abnormal reaction to a sedative. If a medical person was looking at this abnormal reaction, they would describe it in medical speak. They'd say, my, that may be the manifestation of an allergy. Where's my opiate addicts? When you found a little opiates to do in whatever form, you were able to engage pretty well, right? Start cleaning the house, maybe not with the right implement, but when you were out, people thought you were on. That's kind of an abnormal reaction too, right? Meth addicts? Did that stuff calm you down? Do I need to point out that that's an abnormal fucking reaction? Okay, so if we're identifying with this thing, let's see what the doctor says about it. The phenomenon of craving is limited to this class and never occurs in the average temperate drinker. So have you ever ingested whatever it is you chased in here and found you did more than you intended? Yes. Well, that never occurs in the average temperate drinker. Or, if you're an average temperate heroin user, plug in the, or anger addict. I don't care what human condition you came here treating, it doesn't seem to matter. These allergic types can never safely use alcohol in any form at all. And once having formed the habit and found they cannot break it, has that happened for you? Once having lost their self-confidence. Has that happened for you? And not in all areas of your life, but in regard to your ability to be trusted around chemicals. Okay? Their reliance upon things human. Has that happened for you? Maybe? Okay. Their problems pile up on them and become astonishingly difficult to solve. Did any of you have that experience? So then they're going to talk to us a little bit about the condition and active alcoholism, active addiction. Frothy emotional appeal seldom suffices. How many of you had people beg you, if you loved me, you'd stop? And you loved them dearly and didn't stop. Okay? The message which can hold interest and hold these alcoholic people must have depth and weight. Guys, they're not talking about me entertaining you. They're not talking about anyone entertaining you. They're talking to you about truth penetrating the delusion in which you find yourself in active addiction. Does that make sense? So some of you felt that. Did you feel when I said that about truth? So when you felt that, that didn't come from up here. That happened in you. That's the power we call God. In nearly all cases, their ideals must be grounded in a power greater than themselves if they are to recreate their lives. Do you understand why now? How many of you knew it was not safe to do even one? How many went ahead and tried it anyway? So the same self who knew it was not safe did it again. So if there isn't a power greater than myself, which alcohol, cocaine, methamphetamine, and heroin have proven to be, because I meant it every time, except when I didn't. Okay, so I'm going to jump down to the bottom of that page. Men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. Yes. Some of you relate. How many of you like the effect produced by methamphetamine, cocaine, heroin, fentanyl, whatever? Not so much fentanyl. You like the price produced by fentanyl. And the sensation is so elusive that while they admit it injurious, they cannot, after a time, differentiate the true from the false. So how many of you are sober in here tonight? Clean. Wow, almost all of you. That's such a good start. So how many of you can bring to consciousness, feel right now, give yourself permission to go take a hit? Breathe it in. How many of you can feel that right now? Some of you are trying. The rest of you are going, no, fuck that. You're sitting here sober, some of you many years, but you can bring to consciousness right now that sense of ease and comfort that comes at once by just giving yourself permission to get. What are your odds if you can't differentiate the true from the false? We know it's going to produce suffering. We wouldn't be in a place like this. But all I can feel is ease and comfort. You with me? So without a replacement for that, I'm hosed. It's not going to go well. Okay. To them, their alcoholic life seems the only normal one. They are restless, irritable, and discontented unless they can again experience the sense of ease and comfort which comes at once by taking a few drinks which they see others taking with impunity. So how many of you have noticed that when you're abstinent, you're a little restless? So that I don't pick up no matter what plan it's not a good outcome for the guy that's like me. Right? I've heard people implement that plan and they've said, I don't pick up no matter what. And they seemed a little cranky. But they seem to be pulling it off. I didn't. Any of you get perplexed by that? Like I came to the rooms and then I'm like a fucking magician. I disappear. I didn't intend to. Anyone know what I'm talking about? Any of you perplexed by that? Because if I don't do something about the restlessness, irritability, and discontent, I'm constantly in a search for ease and comfort. And I will find it. I know where it's hidden. At least I thought I did, until AA introduced me to where to really find the real juice. Okay, so it says after they've succumbed to the desire again, as so many do, the phenomenon of craving develops, and they pass through the well-known stages of a spree, emerging remorseful with a firm resolution not to drink again. So you've obsessed long enough, now you give yourself permission, and all of a sudden you're in a spree. Do you relate? When you knew you shouldn't be doing it and you had that spree, were you remorseful? Emerged not to do it again. How many of you took it far enough that you didn't emerge not to do it again? You just figured if I don't ever try and stop again, I can't fail again. Now you know what it is to be in a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. See how they're telling the whole story about some seemingly they went with me on some of my runs. Okay, so this is repeated over and over, and unless this person can experience an entire psychic change, there's very little hope of his recovery. I need an inversion of mind, body, spirit. I need to be spirit-led, not mind and body-led. Because I'm already ingesting spirits to get spirit-led. That's how I get free of me. Make sense? All right, so I'm going to jump to the bottom of that page. It says, I do not hold with those who believe alcoholism is entirely a problem of mental control. How many of you have proven the doctor correct? I have. It isn't entirely a problem of mental control. There was some mental control in the beginning, but eventually it was removed from me, or I'm quite sure I wouldn't be here. I've had men who, for example, worked a period of months on some problem or business deal which was to be settled on a certain date favorably to them. They took a drink a day or so prior to the date. The phenomenon of craving at once became paramount to all other interests, so that an important appointment was not met. These men were not drinking to escape. How many of you were told you were drinking to escape? How many of you knew that wasn't quite true? They were not drinking to escape. They were drinking to overcome a craving beyond their mental control. So there are many situations which arise out of the phenomenon of craving which cause men to make the supreme sacrifice rather than continue the fight. Any of you know the ones? Yeah, me too, lots of them. So the point of that was to do a little self-diagnosis. This is a doctor's opinion. The doctor was not an alcoholic, but he had a lot of experience working with alcoholics. And I'm going to assume most of us in here have some alcoholic or addiction history of some sort. And so if we can relate to this, it would be probably prudent to read further and see what else happens in the story. So I want to jump from there, from the doctor's opinion, over to page 18 in the chapter, There's a Solution. And I'm at the top of that page. It says, an illness of this sort, and we've come to believe it an illness. Last week I got a little exuberant, and I asked if there was anyone who just absolutely refused to believe in a power greater than themselves. And then I pointed out in my exuberance, then what the fuck are you doing in a room like this? Because why would I even come here? Why would I waste that valuable high time if I didn't believe cocaine, methamphetamine, heroin, fentanyl, alcohol were a power greater than me? See, first we come to believe it an illness, and then recognizing the hopelessness of my condition, then I'm willing to consider things I wasn't prior ready to consider. Anyone have a similar experience? Okay. So if a person has cancer, all are sorry for him and no one is angry or hurt. But not so with the alcoholic illness, for with it there goes the annihilation of all things worthwhile in life. How many of you had the experience of watching the annihilation of all things worthwhile in your life? In this room, I know a lot of you, right? And there wasn't much sympathy for us, was there? Not even within ourselves, was there? It engulfs all those whose lives touch the sufferers. It brings misunderstanding, fierce resentment, financial insecurity, disgusted friends and employers, warped lives of blameless children, sad wives and parents. Anyone can increase the list. Any of you relate to all that stuff, that wreckage that seems insurmountable? Warped lives of blameless children. How many of you still suffer in the guilt, shame, and remorse from those things? How many of you would like to be delivered from those things? Oh, come on, let's read on then. All right, so we hope this volume will inform and comfort those who are or may be affected. There are many. Highly competent psychiatrists who have dealt with us have found it sometimes impossible to persuade an alcoholic to discuss his situation without reserve. How many of you had lots of people try and talk to you about your addiction and you didn't want to talk to them about it? You don't get it. I can stop when I want to. I just don't want to. It makes me nervous to stop. Or I am stopped. How many of you lied about how much you drank until you had to lie about how much you drank? We just go from liar to liar, right? I drank 4 bottles. I just had 1. Anyway. Okay. So, strangely enough, wives, parents, and intimate friends usually find us more unapproachable than do the psychiatrist or the doctor. How many of you had family people desperately trying to understand you, but there was no story you could tell that was relatable? Anybody know what I'm talking about? You haven't. You said, man, I don't know why I do this. Yes, you do. Then I'd make some shit up just so they'd let me go, right? Okay. But the ex-problem drinker who has found this solution, who is properly armed with the facts about himself, can generally win the entire confidence of another alcoholic in a few hours. Until such an understanding is reached, little or nothing can be accomplished. You know, this whole facility that you guys may be watching online or you guys are in, it was made on this model. The ex-offender, the ex-convict, properly armed with the facts about himself, can generally win the confidence of another in a few hours. The whole building here, the whole concept of this was built on that. We claim that. We believe, because we are peer-led, top to bottom, that we are uniquely qualified to help you come to know yourself, who you are and whose you are, and walk out of here free. So that the man who is making the approach has had the same difficulty, that he obviously knows what he's talking about, that his whole deportment shouts at the new prospect that he is a man with a real answer, that he has no attitude of holier than thou, nothing whatever except the sincere desire to be helpful, that there are no fees to pay, no axes to grind, no people to please, no lectures to be endured. These are the conditions we found most effective. After such an approach, many take up their beds and walk. Believe that, folks. How many of you guys that are staying here noticed when you came in here, everyone said, welcome home? They said, eat all you want. They said, you know, get everything you can while you're here. What can we get for you? Did anyone hand you a bill? No, because we believe in this. This is an atmosphere of abundance, an atmospherics matter. Okay, so I'm going to jump from there. Told you I was going to do it different, Sean. Okay, so I'm going to go to the top of 20. And it says, you may already have asked yourself why it is all of us became so very ill from drinking. Any of you ever questioned why your addiction took you to places? And that's why I ask, because I mean, sometimes we have to wake up a little to realize how sick I was. I had glimpses of how sick I was. Anyone know what I had glimpses of this not going well. It was almost an out-of-body experience. Doubtless you're curious to discover how and why, in the face of expert opinion to the contrary, we've recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. If you are an alcoholic who wants to get over it, you may already be asking yourself, what do I have to do? The reason we show you this book is no one in the rooms knows what you have to do. The one in you, the power in you, knows what you have to do, but this book describes what they did. And so rather than be a reader or a quoter, be a doer and see what happens. Right? So it says it's the purpose of this book to answer such questions specifically. So why are we in the book? Because if I want to know what I have to do, I'm not going to hear it in the modern rooms. I'm only going to hear it in the power of their testimony. We shall tell you what we have done. Before going into detailed discussion, it may be well to summarize some points as we see them. How many times people have said to us, I can take it or leave it alone. Why can't he? How many of you have heard that? You know, your Uncle Charlie used to drink like you. He just stopped. Have you ever heard that? You think, oh, fuck Uncle Charlie. How does that possibly apply to me? Okay. Why don't you drink like a gentleman or quit? You ever heard that? That fellow can't handle his liquor. Why don't you try a beer or wine? Lay off the hard stuff. Put that syringe down, smoke it. His willpower must be weak. He could stop if he wanted to. How many of you were told that? How many of you bought that lie? Over and over, right? She's such a sweet girl. I should think he'd stop for her sake. The doctor told him if he ever drank again, it would kill him. But there he is, all lit up again. How many of you got told by the doctor you kept doing what you're doing, you're going to die? How many of you are like me and says, yeah, I already knew that. Tell me when. That'd be a handy little piece of information to have. Okay? Now, these are commonplace observations on drinkers, which we hear all the time. Back of them is a world of ignorance and misunderstanding. So when we hear it, don't get mad at them, because ignorance isn't a bad word. It means they're ill-informed. Misunderstanding means they have no frame of reference from which to approach, but I do, because I am properly armed with the facts of myself, and I was once just as hopeless as they. Does that make sense? So you're going to find tonight that your addiction is a calling, not a curse, but it's going to require action on your part. So we see that these expressions refer to people whose reactions are very different from ours. How many of you noticed that some people took a drink and go, ooh, I'm feeling lightheaded, I need to stop? You're thinking, that's alcohol abuse. That was the whole point. So we're going to go into a little diagnosis, and you guys work on your own case. So moderate drinkers have little trouble in giving up liquor entirely if they have good reason for it. They can take it or leave it alone. Have you been given good reason to stop using drugs or alcohol or whatever it was you were doing? Anger, criminal behavior. Have you been given good reason to stop? Did you discover you could not stop? In this room, it's a fairly safe assumption that one of those things or some combination happened. So we know that we're not moderate at what we do, right? We've eliminated moderate. Then we have a certain type of hard drinker. He may have the habit badly enough to gradually impair him physically and mentally. It may cause him to die a few years before his time if a sufficiently strong reason, ill health, falling in love, change of environment, or the warning of a doctor becomes operative. This man can also stop or moderate, although he may find it difficult and troublesome and may even need medical attention. So what's it sound like they may need to do for this particular hard drinker?
Quick detox and maybe okay.
He might end up in the same detox as me. And he has sufficient reason, because he ended up in a detox and it was so embarrassing to him that he's going to straighten up and fly right. Stop drinking. And he's going to describe an experience of being able to take it or leave it alone. He's going to not pick up no matter what. Guess what's going to happen when he gets out of that detox? He's going to end up in, no, because he's a hard drinker. He's going to end up in my fellowship, and he's going to tell a story that's not true for me. But his sounds better than mine, because he just doesn't pick up, and I got to do steps. I got to be self-searching, leveling of pride, confession of shortcomings. I got to serve the rest of my life. I got to surrender my will to divine will and serve the rest of my life. And his sounded a lot better. And he's got a chip with digits on it. And no matter how many times I bounce and come back, tore up from the floor up, I still like his story better than the one these guys tell. Because no one broke it down for me till someone did. So, what about the real alcoholics? I don't know if you transition. If you're the person with sufficient reason can stop, more power to you. What about the real alcoholic? He may start off as a moderate drinker. Anyone here start out moderate? How many of you were just kind of full on right from the gate? My peeps. I was hospitalized for alcohol poisoning the first time at 10. And it didn't get any better from there. There you go, atta girl. Find something you're good and stick to it, so what Dad said, right? Okay. He didn't mean the drinking. Okay. He may start off as a moderate drinker. He may or may not become a continuous hard drinker, but at some stage of his drinking career, he begins to lose all control of his liquor consumption once he starts to drink. So how many of you had the progressive loss of control? For a while, there was some illusion of control. Okay. So notice how the event, once I start to drink, the control is gone. Prior to that, maybe. Okay. So here's the fellow who's been puzzling you, especially in his lack of control. Now, the authors of this book knew how offensive to my ego my active addiction is. And so if I'm not reading this book about someone else, because see, no matter how bad I got in my addiction, and I got pretty bad, but no matter how bad I got, I always maintained someone worse than me. At least I'm not that bad yet. You got a picture of them? So this book describes me, that guy. At least I'm not that bad yet, even though I'm reading about me. So as you start to read this book, you'll see the genius of this book. He's the fellow who's been puzzling you, especially in his lack of control. He does absurd, incredible, tragic things while drinking. How many of you have done absurd, incredible, tragic things? He's a real Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Any of you experience a little personality change when drinking? He's seldom mildly intoxicated. He's always more or less insanely drunk. Now that can be a little baffling to the real drinkers. How many of you didn't think you were that drunk, but you went to the detox and they suggested you needed hospitalization? Like your blood alcohol was dangerously high, but you were still trying to help the people in the waiting room? Struck a nerve with somebody, right? Always the helper. His disposition while drinking resembles his normal nature, but little. How many of you even know what your normal nature is? If we're in an addiction very long, that's a baffling thing. What is normal nature for a guy like me? What had to be explained to me by psychiatric people is that normal human nature is more childlike than childish. And so childlike is accepting, sort of interested and curious and inquisitive. Childish is making a mess out of everything. Old timers said, pole vaulting over mouse turds. Apparently hitting a few more seats, huh? All right. So he may be one of the finest fellows in the world, yet let him drink for a day and he frequently becomes disgustingly and even dangerously antisocial. How many of you had that experience? Whatever chemical or whatever you're engaged in. He has a positive genius for getting tight at exactly the wrong moment, particularly when some important decision... There we go. When some important decision must be made or engagement kept. He's often perfectly sensible and well-balanced concerning everything except liquor, but in that respect, he's incredibly dishonest and selfish. So how many of you got to that point? He often possesses special abilities, skills, and aptitudes. How many of you refer to the gifted? Probably everyone in this room. Has a promising career ahead of him. He uses his gifts to build up a bright outlook for his family and himself, and then pulls the structure down on his head by a senseless series of sprees. Any of you relate to that? Getting your life together, it's going good, got a job, got opportunity, the family's sort of skeptical but hopeful, and just burn that bitch down right to the ground. He's the fellow who goes to bed so intoxicated he ought to sleep the clock around, yet early The next morning, he searches madly for the bottle he misplaced the night before. If he can afford it, he may have liquor concealed all over his house to be certain no one gets his entire supply away from him to throw down the waste pipe. How many of you were drinkers? Were you hiders? Drinkers or hiders? Where's my meth addicts? You guys are hiders too. We got to cut the seams out of your shorts and everything. We're freaking good at it too. Heroin addicts, sorry, we're not good hiders. It already went in us. We're hopeful that there's some hidden, but we know better than that. As matters grow worse, he begins to use a combination of high-powered sedative and liquor to quiet his nerves so he can go to work. How many of you did a little better living through chemistry? Smoke enough weed that you can stop throwing up, so you can get enough booze down so you can stop shaking, then get the opiates in you so you can kind of level up. There we go. Now we're going to go to work. Perhaps he goes to a doctor who gives him morphine or some sedative with which to taper off, and then he begins to appear at hospitals and sanitariums. Any of you see the progression there? Not in any particular order. Sound like they knew something about us? This is 80 plus years ago, folks. They wrote this book, put all this detail in. So I'm going to jump now from there. That I need to go to the next page, 23. We've gone through all these observations. It starts with, these observations would be academic and pointless if our friend never took the first drink, thereby setting the terrible cycle in motion. So the insanity of addiction is not what happens after I drink. That's the shit that happens to drunk people. The insanity of addiction is knowing what I know of my condition, I take the drink or the drug anyway and set the terrible cycle in motion. This is why mental control doesn't work, because the relapse has occurred before the drink goes in. In rooms where we celebrate abstinence, we say, as long as you don't drink, you're fine. That's not true if I'm trying to be free, because the thought, we already proved we can bring to consciousness right now the sense of ease and comfort. I can be high before I take it. So, therefore, the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind rather than his body. If you ask him why he started on that last bender, the chances are he'll offer you any one of 100 alibis. So can you think of any? Grandma died.
Shoelace broke.
Sometimes these excuses have a certain plausibility, but none of them really make sense in the light of the havoc an alcoholic's drinking bout creates. Right? So they said that later they'll tell us that it's a lack of proportion, the ability to think clearly. So some event that would be survivable, I'll make unsurvivable by taking a drink, but I'll excuse myself because, after all, my shoelace broke. They sound like the philosophy of a man who, having a headache, beats himself on the head with a hammer so he won't feel the ache. Okay, who laughed? Denise laughed, and the rest of you sat there stoically silent. So it says, if you draw this fallacious reasoning to the attention of an alcoholic, he'll laugh it off, thank you, Denise, or become irritated and refuse to talk. Thank you, the rest of you. Because what a ridiculous example of how I behave. Once in a while, he may tell the truth. And the truth, strange to say, is usually he has no more idea why he took that first drink than you have, to my point. I don't know why. Some drinkers have excuses with which they're satisfied part of the time, but in their hearts, they really do not know why they do it. They're starting to describe the battle between head and heart. They're talking about a sensory experience. How many of you tried to give yourself an excuse for what was about to turn out bad, but you knew this is a lie? I'm not stopping, but this is a lie. Okay? Once this malady has a real hold, they're a baffled lot. There's the obsession that somehow, someday, they'll beat the game, that they often suspect they're down for the count. Again, head and heart. How true this is, few realize. So these guys are on the other side, and they want you to know when you're in that battle, you're right. You can't beat this if you're us, right? So in a vague way, their families and friends sense that these drinkers are abnormal. How many of you had some family and friends that thought, no more? We were beyond help. But everybody hopefully awaits the day when the sufferer will rouse himself from his lethargy and assert his power of will. The tragic truth is that if a man be a real alcoholic, remember we went through and diagnosed real alcoholic from hard drinker, you're the only one who knows. They don't even declare it in here because it's no one else's business. The answer's for you or in you. The happy day may not arrive. He has lost control. How many of you have lost something? Did you get it back? No, because I lost it. I may have replaced it, I may have, right? But okay. At a certain point in the drinking of every alcoholic, he passes into a state where the most powerful desire to stop drinking is of absolutely no avail. The tragic situation has already arrived in practically every case long before it's suspected. How many of you desperately wanted to stop, really meant to everyone you told, I desperately want to stop, and could prove with no outward action that you wanted to stop? That somehow you just kept ending up back under the influence. So that tragic situation has arrived before it's suspected. Does that make sense? These guys are pretty good at describing an experience many of us have lived through. So it makes sense to pay attention to what they discovered. So now they're going to be in italics. When they put it in italics, they want you to pay attention to what their declaration is. And the reason they want you to pay attention is it's fundamental to your recovery, your opportunity to get well. The fact is that most alcoholics, for reasons yet obscure, have lost the power of choice in drink. What does it mean to have lost the power of choice? I'm going to drink, and I'm not going to know when. It's just going to happen. How many of you go, well, I didn't get drunk every time I drank. I didn't get twisted clear off every time I used. Any of you in that class? How many of you knew which time it was going to happen and which one wasn't? Did you ever really have control, or was that an illusion? Okay. So our so-called willpower becomes practically non-existent. How many of you took it far enough that you didn't even try anymore? Yes, that's how it's described. Yeah, it's a case of the fuckets. So we're unable at certain times, now they're talking about them, not you, but this is us aligning with them. We are unable at certain times to bring into our consciousness with sufficient force the memory of suffering and humiliation of even a week or a month ago. We're without defense against the first drink. So there's a test coming at some time in the future. They don't announce the date, but if I'm not spiritually sound, I will not be able to bring to consciousness, which we were able to bring to consciousness, the ease and comfort sitting in here sober, with sufficient force the memory of suffering. They've separated the idea of consciousness from memory. So the whole idea of play the tapes, think it through, it's all bullshit for a guy like me. Because I've played the tapes, I've thought it through, I get high. And then I go to the hospital or jail or some combination thereof. Because that's the way I roll. Come on, it'll be epic. The almost certain consequences that follow taking even a glass of beer do not crowd into the mind to deter us. If these thoughts occur, they're hazy and readily supplanted with the old threadbare idea that this time we shall handle ourselves like other people. There is a complete failure of the kind of defense that keeps one from putting his hand on a hot stove. Anyone getting a better understanding of their addictive disorder and why we go to great lengths? Here we don't spend a lot of time telling you what to do therapeutically. We give you tools, but we really encourage you to adopt a manner of living that just removes that obsession from you. And we try our whole little community here is based on it, by the way. So I'm going to jump from there to the bottom of the next page. Middle of the page. The great fact is just this and nothing less, that we've had deep and effective spiritual experiences. So they're telling you what the solution is to their seemingly hopeless state of mind and body, which have revolutionized our whole attitude toward life, toward our fellows, and toward God's universe. The central fact of our lives today is the absolute certainty that our Creator has entered in our hearts and lives in a way which is indeed miraculous. He has commenced to accomplish those things for us which we could never do for ourselves. If you're as seriously alcoholic as we were, we believe there is no middle-of-the-road solution. So you're the only one who knows, but what would a middle-of-the-road solution be? Go to meetings, don't drink between the meetings. Get a service commitment. The program describes a life of testimony, bearing witness to the life within me, the one that restored me, right? And you don't have to be a religious person to share the relationship with the Creator, because I'm not talking to you of a theory. I'm absolutely certain that the Creator, my Creator, dwells in me and lives through me. Make sense? And if you spend very much time with me, you'll be at least troubled by why I'm so certain. Right? Some of you are feeling that. Okay. All right. So it says we were in a position where life was becoming impossible. Any of you been there? And if we had passed into the region from which there is no return through human aid, we had but two alternatives. Now, an alternative is not a choice. An alternative is I can go to the bitter end, blotting out my consciousness the best I can, or I can grab onto something that takes me radically in the other direction. But that's not a choice, because the other one's happening unless I do this. So that's an alternative. Does that make sense? One was to go on to the bitter end, blotting out the consciousness of our intolerable situation as best we could, and the other to accept spiritual help. And God met me where I was, so the acceptance wasn't that difficult. All I had to do is believe in the one He sent. Because I was experiencing tangible power. Okay, so this we did because we honestly wanted to and were willing to make the effort. So the entire program is based on I honestly want to grow, and I'm willing to make the effort to do that, which means I'm going to have to quit talking about it and start being about it. That make sense? Okay. I'm going to go from there, because we're going to run out of time. I want to go to page 30 and go through some other stuff. And we're in the chapter more about alcoholism, and they're going to talk to us a little bit about the condition that we're treating. So it says, most of us have been unwilling to admit that we were real alcoholics. You'd have to know that they defined the real alcoholic, right? Because I was willing to declare I was an alcoholic when people would point out how much I drank. Well, of course, I'm an alcoholic. What do you think? But I'd taken another drink. So it confuses people, and they think that when I witness to you as an alcoholic, that I'm talking to you about a present condition. No, I'm not. When I tell you I'm Joe, I'm alcoholic, I'm witnessing to you about a condition from which I've been restored. I've been redeemed. I've been raised above. But I tell you of that condition because it's hopeless. Because I shouldn't be here telling you I should be dead because it's a fatal illness. And it's no different than biblically Matthew telling you that he was a tax collector and an apostle, to show you that this God we seek is in the business of restoring lives. Okay? So, no person likes to think he's bodily and mentally different from his fellows. Therefore, it's not surprising that our drinking careers have been characterized by countless vain attempts to prove we could drink like other people. Any of you remember trying to... Okay? The idea that somehow, someday, he will control and enjoy his drinking is the great obsession of every abnormal drinker. So how many of you discovered that you could at times control it, but you did not enjoy it? And when you enjoyed it, there was no pretense of control. So control and enjoy are mutually exclusive, but that's the great obsession. It's constantly lying to me, yes? Now, take the alcohol away. because alcohol is just a symptom. The idea that he can control and enjoy his thinking is the great obsession of every abnormal thinker. Because you're supposed to read this book sober and then learn how to get free of those disturbing thoughts. So after the first pass, we're no longer talking about a symptom, we're talking about a condition, the human condition, in which I can't control my thinking, seemingly. Does that make sense? The persistence of this illusion is astonishing, and many pursue it into the gates of insanity or death. What illusion? The illusion of control. We're not treating an alcohol addiction, a heroin addiction, an anger addiction. We're treating a control addiction. The only substance in the known universe that can treat a control addiction is a substance called faith. Let it resonate with you. Faith is the bridge from where you are to where you're going. Okay? All right. So then it goes on to another little confusing thing that happens in our rooms. We learned that we had to fully concede to our innermost selves that we were alcoholics. This is the first step in recovery. Now, how many of you have been in those rooms and you saw the poster on the wall? And there was a step 1, and it didn't say that. What does it say? We admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. So if I ask anyone what the first step is, they say something about powerless and unmanageable. But 30 pages in, these people said what they learned. We learned that we had to fully concede, surrender my will to my innermost self, that I really am this guy. That's the first step in recovery. It isn't until I've come to believe it in illness that I'm willing to consider there's a power that can restore. That's the first step in recovery. Does that make sense? So the first step on the wall is an instruction, and this here on page 30 is the experience described. Does that help some of you get confused? Because it's easy to get confused in our fellowship if we don't understand that the fellowship was named after the book, and the precise instructions are never in the rooms, they're in the book. The delusion that we are like other people, or presently maybe, has to be smashed. Everyone wants to smash their own delusion. So the nature of delusion is you lie to you and you don't know you're lying. So if you're smashing your own delusion, you really are delusional. That's the tricky nature of this thing. Okay, we alcoholics are men and women who've lost the ability to control our drinking. We know that no real alcoholic ever recovers control. All of us felt at times we were regaining control, but such intervals, usually brief, were inevitably followed by still less control, which led in time to pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. Pitiful, to evoke contempt from self or others. Incomprehensible, impossible to know. How many of you have been in such a deplorable state that the depths of your suffering were impossible? You just couldn't even comprehend it, and you know no one else could either. Felt very alone.
I need to kill myself.
Well, and that's demoralization without fight. Start to make sense now what they're describing? Any of you there? So then it says, we're convinced to a man that alcoholics of our type, which type? Real alcoholics, are in the grip of a progressive illness. Over any considerable period, we get worse, never better. Okay, so that left us there. And now what I want to do is go back to Bill's story, because I don't like to end on such a downer. We've had a little powerless and unmanageability. And then we got Ebby visiting Bill. And I'm going to go to page 13 of the book. It says, my schoolmate visited me and I fully acquainted him with my problems and deficiencies. What's that sound like?
Step 4, 5.
He's starting to get an inventory together, yep. We made a list of people I had hurt or to whom I felt resentment. I expressed my entire willingness to approach these individuals, admitting my wrong. Never was I to be critical of them. I was to write all such matters to the utmost of my ability. I was to test my thinking by the new God consciousness within. See, I replaced consciousness greater than me with my human consciousness because it was insufficient to battle my addiction. So regardless of your theology, this should make sense, right? Common sense would thus become uncommon sense. I was to sit quietly when in doubt, asking only for direction and strength to meet my problems as he would have me, capital H. So who? The Creator within me, right? I've discovered this tangible power within me. We'll go through that next week. Never was I to pray for myself, except as my request bore on my usefulness to others. Then only might I expect to receive, but that would be in great measure. Guys, I prayed for anything just to be useful for years, and I lived on very little because I came back into the fellowships and I didn't gain anything. I was homeless and it took a long, long time. And I just wanted to serve, and we've been given this opportunity to serve. We'll be serving for generations in places like this. Just so you understand, this isn't theories for me. This is what I saw happen. I lost everything getting here, and none of it was worth anything to me because I'd be doing this with nothing. My friend promised when these things were done, I would enter upon a new relationship with my Creator. How many of you are wondering, why would I want a new relationship with a Creator I don't believe in? Some of us, we think that. I'll tell you why they learned, because half of them were atheists or agnostics. The world does not cause how I think and feel. It reflects how I'm thinking and feeling. So I found out there is a power within me that is able to empower me to be kinder than I feel like being. And when I am disturbed in the world, if I'll go inward and get right with this Creator within me, the world straightens out. That's what I learned. It's not a theology, it's just a fact from my experience. So that I'd have the elements of a way of living which answered all my problems. So what's the elements of the way of living? Yeah, watch, ask, discuss, turn. Answers all my problems. My problems, I think, are of my own making. They arise out of myself. See, the problem and the solution both reside in me. So I don't need to look any further than that. Belief in the power of God. Notice how they didn't say a theology. They didn't give us just come to believe in power. Enough willingness, honesty, and humility to establish and maintain the new order of things were the essential requirements. So people will like to talk about the how of AA. That's above our pay grade. How's got nothing to do with it. It's who, not how. I don't know how God does it, but I do know God does it. Simple but not easy, a price had to be paid. It meant destruction of self-centeredness. I must turn in all things to the Father of light who presides over us all. These were revolutionary and drastic proposals, but the moment I fully accepted them, the effect was electric. How many of you have had an electric effect when you've had someone share the Spirit with you? So he's talking about something tangible now, isn't he? And those of you that have not had this, grab one of us if you have an interest and let us introduce you to this power. Because the effect is electric. He's going to talk to us. There was a sense of victory followed by such a peace and serenity as I had never known. There was utter confidence. I felt lifted up as though the great clean wind of a mountaintop blew through and through. God comes to most men gradually, but his impact on me was sudden and profound. For a moment I was alarmed and called my friend the doctor to ask if I were still sane. He listened in wonder as I talked. Finally he shook his head saying, "Something's happened to you I don't understand, but you'd better hang on to it. Anything is better than the way you were." The good doctor now sees many men who've had such experiences. He knows that they're real. Why does the good doctor, not an alcoholic, know these experiences are real? Because he can feel it and he's seen the effect. How many of you have seen it in our rooms? People come, I bet they don't make it. Look at a shit show they are. And that's the one that comes up to you and say, "Will you sponsor me?" Oh, fuck. And they're doing good. While I lay in the hospital, the thought came there were thousands of hopeless alcoholics who might be glad to have what had been so freely given me. Perhaps I could help some of them, and they in turn might work with others. So let me leave you with this. He wrote this in 1939-ish, and it's now 2021, and we are among the many others. And everyone that you'll touch from this day forward is among the many others. It's a brilliant prophecy. It's a brilliant testimony. Thank you very much for being here. Next